Well, Tyler, our boys did it.
We finally did it.
You know, they said we couldn't do it.
We proved
There's
them wrong.
There's always talk about, the United States fell off. Like, you're not the global superpower anymore. Like, what about rising China? I don't know if our listeners saw this, but I saw one of the most moving headlines in recent memory about our beautiful troops.
It made me stand up and remove. It actually made me put on a hat and then remove it. Yeah.
I actually put on my my tri-corner hat to really get back in the spirit of what this is all about. I was wearing my tri-corner hat and my FBI female body inspector t-shirt. The headline.
Give people the news.
This is a Business Insider headline from August 3rd, 2022. U.S. Marines just ate all the eggs in one of southeastern Europe's most strategically important port cities. They ate all the eggs.
I like there's a line that just says, I served 16 different types of meat at my restaurant, and they tried them all.
I mean, look, this one. All right, so this says that basically 1,500 Marines were eating 6,000 to 7,000 eggs a day.
Those are our boys.
Like, that's an absurd.
Those are our boys.
Let's say, let me just do this: 7,000 divided by 1,500. I mean,
we
that's like not that much. That's only like a little under, like a little over 4.5 eggs a person. That's like not in a reasonable amount of eggs, but
I would have been curious. I'm not gonna drop names on this podcast. I don't want to get hit by lawsuits. But we went to high school with someone who would eat hard-boiled eggs for lunch. Can you imagine if they deployed him over there?
The farts would drown out the Russians.
We would win. I don't even know like what we would be winning, but we would win it.
When it comes to being the global glutton fat asses, we are undefeated.
Yeah, I remember reading that Mexico was now like the world's most overweight country, and I don't know what we're doing, but we need to step up.
It's all these influencers who are like, stop eating seed oils. They're killing what makes this country great.
No, you don't tell.
Like, you need to go to the grocery store. I want you to get a fucking Twinkie, some Cheese Whiz, and a goddamn Hebrew National. And I want you to make the goddamn Twinkie Wiener sandwich from that Weird Al movie in the 80s. That's what made this country great.
Was that a UHF?
Yeah.
The movie?
Yeah.
They were just showing that at my local Alamo draft house like a few weeks ago.
Were you inspired to have a Twinkie Wiener sandwich?
I didn't go, I think, because I saw Beach House that night, so...
Oh, so you just hate America, is what you're saying.
Well, I was eating eggs at the concert, so...
Alright, God bless.
I was in spirit.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to We Demand a Podcast. I'm Danny.
I'm Tyler.
We're two old friends with two very different tastes in music. So every month we get together, share a record with one another, and then decide who's wrong and who has to spend a night in the box.
Or the CPAC January 6th cage.
I mean, that's more of a privilege than a punishment, but...
that's if you enjoyed what you listened to.
So we have a special episode this week.
This is our 5th episode. We made it. We had a lot of doubters. Maybe our parents, they weren't expecting us to do much. Yeah, I got a lot of hate mail.
My 8th grade math teacher said I never amount to shit.
Well, check this out, bitch.
Well, she's fucking dead. No, I'm
yeah,
kidding.
and we're doing a podcast.
If she is in fact alive, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to disrespect you like that, but you were an ass geometry teacher.
We'll have to reach out and hear her thoughts on your selection. So what did you give to me?
I gave to you the Alwasta EP by Oddisee. I just want to say that this is listed on Bandcamp and Spotify as an album. However, I first heard this on his SoundCloud when he released it, where it is still listed as Alwasta EP. So I don't want the fucking haters and the debunkers to come into our podcast and tell me I'm fucking wrong.
Get out of here with your Snopes bullshit. We're not having it.
This is a deep fake. I'm with Joe Biden right now. Anyway, all right.
He's listening to it. He didn't get COVID. He was just listening to this EP and loved it so much he faked that.
We actually forced him into isolation to listen to the EPs. That's why he saved the climate bill. Anyway, so Oddisee is, I guess I'd call him charitably an underground rapper, producer, band leader. He is the son of Sudanese immigrants. He grew up in PG County, right outside of Washington, D.C. This is, I believe, his it's like his 10th or 11th project. He had been grinding for a long time before this and didn't really start rapping until about 2012, I think, is his debut album, where he's actually writing and rapping rather than just being a producer. And the album right before this, so this EP is sandwiched by 2 albums, and then he hasn't really made anything since then. So this is 2016, 2015, 2016. I can't exactly remember, but it's in that sort of it's in the period where people are starting to realize what the Donald Trump phenomenon means. And it's sandwiched between 2 albums where his first album with a live band, and I think the album after this where he really kind of finds that line in between sort of sample-based production methods and live band. And this sort of exists in between that. It's one of my favorite EPs. And I actually had some interesting moments re-listening to it because I'm not sure I've really sat down and studied it since probably around the time it came out. Even though I've listened to it all the time. But Tyler, what'd you think?
I think this is maybe my favorite selection of yours so far.
Oh, wow.
I really enjoyed it. I think it's because of the production. That right off the bat, that's what really stood out to me about it. It has an old school vibe to it. Kind of reminiscent of something not exactly like A Tribe Called Quest, but I would say it's kind of comparing it to a lot of hip hop today. It's more understated. I think we had this discussion on our first episode about how a lot of hip hop today is very overproduced in the sense it's more bombastic and there's so much more going on. I mean, you look at the stuff that Kendrick Lamar does today. There's just a lot going on here, and I always like when you can kind of keep things a little simpler, or maybe contained is a better way to put it. When it comes to hip hop, I don't want to categorize it as lo-fi hip hop, because I think there's elements of that, but it's not totally in that genre. But everything had this vibrato-y sound to it, which I love. I love that kind of, this old record sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think there's a big soul influence on there too. So, and I think the fact that it was, it was bite-sized, it's short and sweet. I really enjoyed that. I made another note that I think I was listening to this during the perfect time of the year to listen to it. It worked really well for hot days in the summer. You're riding on the train, driving in your car, walking around. But then also when it's cooler at night and you're just relaxing at home, kind of listen to it in both of those environments. And I had a lot of fun with it. My favorite tracks were Asked About You, which was the opener, No Reservations, and Slow Groove. Those were my top 3. I've said before, I think openers for me are really important. A lot of my favorite tracks tend to be the openers, and I think Asked About You was a great opener. And then Slow Groove is a great closer too. I
Yeah.
really like that one. Um, and what I liked about No Reservations is I want to say
I
that was the
mean,
second track.
yeah, the percussion on that track is just
Yeah,
nuts.
like it. You kind of go in thinking, oh, this is gonna be sort of like this more chill hip hop album, and then when I got to No Reservations, I was like, oh, okay. Like I'm not really sure like what kind of direction we're going to be going into, but I really liked the percussion in that one. There's also this synth pad underneath the verse
Yeah.
that I loved it. If I just had a version of this track that was just like it basically just an instrumental but with the synths a bit more prominent, I was all over that. So I a lot of that production stuff it came together really well for me. So yeah, like I said, I out of everything we listened to, this was definitely the one I went back to the most in a sense of, oh, I'm gonna listen to this for fun now, and
Yeah.
not, oh, I'm gonna listen to this and let me try and well figure things out to talk about. And it's definitely one I'm gonna go back to and listen to some more because I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say I'm a little hurt that all my other albums have just been chores for you.
Yeah, I was
Um,
like, God damn, I gotta listen to that one again.
no, but yeah, I mean, I would say my favorite tracks are pretty similar. I would say No Reservations and Slow Groove, and then I go back and forth on Catch a Vibe and Wouldn't Be Surprised. I think Catch a Vibe is my favorite verse. I love the little kind of like 8-bit like sound like every couple
Hmm.
bars. And I think something you
Yeah,
said about like the synth pads in No Reservations is this album has a really strong sonic identity. Like the palette is very consistent. I think that
yeah,
with some sample based hip hop, something I like about it a lot is that sometimes it can be very different sonic palettes in terms of like instrumentation and sounds. And while no two beats really sound all that alike on this, it feels very cohesive sonically.
yeah, yeah. I would agree. It's very sure of what it's doing and its place. How much of this was, if you know, how much of it was built from samples and how much of it was created? Because you were saying earlier he did this with live, like a live band, or
Yeah, so the album before this, he puts together a live band, and this is
mm,
there's definitely a live band on this. Like the drums on like No Reservations and stuff are definitely live.
yeah,
I didn't research which one of these are samples, and frankly, with stuff that's like less mainstream like this, a lot of times it won't be a super good like resource for that, especially because it's like a
mm-hmm,
Bandcamp release. Slow
right,
Groove is a very famous sample. It's a very famous Eddie, Eddie Kendrick song. Who's
mm-hmm,
like I actually at some point might give you one of his records. He's kind of like this Alabama soul guy from the early 70s.
okay,
But I think that for the most part, this album and then the album after it are less sample heavy. Like if you listen to something I want to say about Odyssey that I think is interesting as a guy is that, like I said, he's a producer first, and I think
mm-hmm,
that's one of the reasons. The two reasons I gave you this were the beats are phenomenal, as
oh
all the
yeah,
stuff is, but the hooks on this record I find very strong, which I think is not always the case for guys who try this hard to be. I don't know about lyrical, but want to be like technically and lyrically impressive. Like one of the to bring back to Kendrick Lamar, one of the earliest criticisms of him I remember when he was first starting to catch on was he didn't have hooks. And I think that is important, especially for like making it listenable and making it fun. Um,
mm-hmm,
but
yeah. This is, if I had to categorize music as like intellectual and then fun. I'm definitely putting this more over to fun. That isn't to say there isn't anything intellectual happening here, because I definitely think there is, but this is a lot of music that I would add some of these tracks to a playlist that I would have if I'm having some people over and I just, have some music in the background um, that fits the vibe and everything. But going to what I was saying with the more intellectual stuff, I actually really enjoyed the lyricism on it.
yes,
I think a lot of the lyrics were really good. Asked about you, again, a big reason I love that as an opener is a lot of times when I listen to music, I'm drawn to the music itself first and then the lyrics. which we'll talk about that later. Um, but for this one, I was finding myself more invested in hearing the lyrics on my first go around than I normally do.
Mm.
I think 'cause some of the lines they're simple, but they work really well. So there was a line in Lifting Shadows I liked where he says, "Love my country, hate its politics." It's a really simple line, but it resonated with me. I'm like, yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Like, I love the idea of what we have, but I kind of hate everything else going on. So it's not like he's trying to be the smartest guy in the room, and I admire that. Um, but yeah, I enjoyed the lyricism and just the flow of everything. Again, going back to No Reservations,
Yes.
in a way, he is competing with that percussion, but he keeps up with that. And the way those two worked, I thought was a lot of fun and a really good listen.
Yeah, two things I want to touch on is one, I was listening to this with my roommate, who was when we were in high school. He was a big fan of Oddisee too, but I don't know if he kept up with them as much as I did. But he drew the comparison that him and other sort of the other big DC rap, the other major DC rapper of the past couple of years, who isn't more like pop oriented or more trap oriented, was Wale, and they both, like, their flows are really similar to like how go-go drums work out.
Yes.
In the like
Yeah,
in
I
sort
was
of
gonna.
that
Yeah.
bounce and that pocket. And I think that No Reservations is, I've listened to almost all his music, and I think it's by far the most impressive flow he ever had. Like on that first verse, it's the point to where I rarely have to do this, especially with albums I know. But when I was listening to it, I would constantly run it back to like catch the lyrics, because I was just so like lost in the dexterity of the way he was in the pocket and like moving
Yeah.
in and out of it.
Absolutely.
And some of the lyrics I want to touch on is like, I think that I think there's a tendency in underground rap, particularly in the 2000s, and I think it kind of becomes the joke of like people trying really, really, really hard to seem like clever or like the most skilled or like has the craziest entendres or whatever. And I think that, a lot of Oddisee's music is, I'd put him more in like the backpacker sort of tradition, which some people might think is a like an insult, but I don't think even that word maybe has some negative connotations. Like, you mentioned Tribe Called Quest, like they're sort of like progenitors of that style of like, it's
Yeah.
very slice of life stuff. Usually alternative rap sort of influences, so kind of like soul and jazz samples, and it usually is socially conscious. So I think it's not like offensive to put him in this category, but because it's socially conscious and because it's sort of slice of life, if you make it too complicated, it's not going to work. Like, it's not going to be accessible. The message won't be heard. But on the lyrics, man, I think he has some of the coldest like opening bars on this record. Like, I think the opening line of this record on Asked About You is, "These are good days for bad people."
Yeah, I love that line.
And like it just like sets this tone, like, you know what I mean. And then also on No Reservations, he opens it with, "If I could make time, I wouldn't make nothing else, because if I could make time, everything would probably make itself." Like, just like very, like these very kind of like nuggets of very clever stuff kind of buried in with some of this more like, I wouldn't even call it storytelling, but like it's very narrative driven, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, to compare it to something we've listened to previously, Action Bronson's Blue Chips. I talked about with that, listening to that, it felt like I was hanging out with Action Bronson for a day, and we're hitting all these stops in New York City, um, and that style was more, you just were mentioning the the references and things you can make and all that sort of stuff. That almost kind of becomes like this contest,
yeah.
and Blue Chips felt a little bit more like that. I mean, he's referencing like Ruud van Nistelrooy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it works really well. Whereas this felt like I'm just hanging out with Odyssey and like a close knit friends and maybe we're just hanging out at home and it's more of a casual conversation about how things are and everything that's going on, as opposed to a more cocky, confident, show-offy sort of style.
Yeah.
And I really like that. That's not to say he isn't being confident on here, because he obviously is, but I thought that was a really cool like mood and vibe to get into.
It's a very conversational record. That's a very good word. I wish I had thought of it,
Yeah.
but I did not. So fuck you. I also think that the idea of like braggadocio is sort of, it permeates through this record in a way. Like Strength and Weaknesses is very much about him recognizing that he's good at this music shit and that he's making money off this music shit, and he simultaneously has sort of influence over people, but simultaneously he's not top dog and people are going to exploit him or judge him for his influence. Like the chorus is like, he says like my strength and weakness are one and the same, you know. And I think it shows like there's a level of emotional introspection you don't always get. And I think all music where it's like, you know, in the sort of like meta perspective, because like it feels like there's sort of like two running themes, right? There's stuff I'd say is more overtly political, like Lifting Shadows, which is very much just about Trump, like
Yeah.
and then, you know, Asked About You is, you know, very much about the political state sort of, you know, the mid 2010s. But then you also have like the stuff like Catch a Vibe or No Reservations that are very much about like not, you know, focusing too much on particular goals and not, you know, setting yourself up by failure by becoming hyper fixated on sort of like target points. Like, sort of like, you know, even though times are tough and things are complicated and, you know, maybe people are trying to like pull one over me for my music, you know, maybe people are like taking advantage of me, I kind of just gotta like, you know, ride the wave as much as possible and just like do what I can with like what I have.
Yeah.
And I think that those two themes combined, being like this kind of, the world's going to hell, but I don't make reservations, don't have none either. I think it's like it's an interesting sort of and I think very relatable parallel sort of ideas.
Yeah. That's definitely, that makes me want to go back and listen to that track, kind of with that in mind. But yeah, I'm trying to think of if I have any other major talking points. I know it's doing EPs, it's a little bit shorter, a little bit less to talk about.
I guess one more thing I wanted to talk about is I really enjoyed his second verse on Slow Groove. That the first half of it is all about I've been contemplating drinking and the use of drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Like that particular run of lyrics I found really, especially because on the song on Catch a Vibe right before, he makes this sort of offhanded reference to I think we're all addicted, and then the next song he's like, I've been contemplating drinking the use of drugs because all of my favorite artists did it, but you know, they sort of lost control, and I know I can't handle it because everything I do it the most. It just so happens I'm rewarded for being extreme. I think it's like a really interesting like Slow Groove. When I was listening to it, there's a lot of things that kind of reflects back from earlier songs in a very subtle way, like thematically tying the knot. I was just very impressed re-listening to it because there was a point through my re-listens where I was like, I don't know if I actually like this as much as I thought I did. Like I went through a phase where I was like, he sounds kind of bitter, you know. Like I was very kind of like he seems kind of bitter on a lot of these songs, like defensive and kind of like cutting down people around him.
Mm-hmm.
But when I listened to it, sort of like my sort of penultimate time, it all worked again. Where if it feels like the songs are in conversation with each other, was sort of like this button moment on Slow Groove, particularly that last verse. I don't know. I was just very, like you said, it seemed very controlled. Like it's just a very tight record. And I feel like with hip hop, with the stream of consciousness tradition, it's not always like the appeal is that it's not tight. Like to bring back to Action Bronson, like half the fun is that it's all over the place and it's ridiculous and
Right.
it's tenuously connected at times. And this
Yeah.
is like the opposite. This is very like
Yeah, it feels like it's like one big long take as you're walking around the town with him. And everything is connected. It all exists within this same world. Um and I like that it does look both inward and outward because I think you need to look at both of those to have a genuine conversation with your art and with your music. And I like you said, I do like how there is a very good flow between these tracks and how they're all communicating with each other. I think the way the tracks are listed out and everything too plays an important role. Yeah, I really liked it. I want to check out more of his stuff because I really like this style of hip hop. I guess you said earlier it's alternative hip hop. Is that like the main genre you would put this under?
I think like alternative hip hop is I think that is kind of lost in the same way alternative rock kind of like became a super
Yeah,
broad category over like the first 15 years. Like I don't
right.
like alternative rap is usually traditionally for like De La Soul and Tribe and like that sort of stuff. I think and so
Hmm.
I would say it's definitely alternative rap. It's definitely like I would say this is like backpacker stuff. Like if when we continue to do this podcast, I'll definitely give you more of that sort of stuff. Um, he has the album immediately after this, the Iceberg.
Hmm.
I think this is like magnum opus. Like I almost regret giving this one. Sorry, some technical difficulties, but I was saying that
We'll fix it in post. We'll fix it in post.
we'll fix it in post. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Uh, his 2017 album, the one immediately after this, called The Iceberg. I think this is like magnum opus. I kind of regret almost giving you this EP instead of that one, because I'd love to talk about that one too. But he also has an instrumental record, like a beat tape from 2010 called
Ooh.
Rock Creek Park, that I think is phenomenal. So I mean, but definitely The Iceberg if you like this a lot. You know, they're very similar thematically. I think he built on a lot of the production ideas he has on this. And there's some good go-go stuff. So what's there not to love?
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that out because, like I said, I really enjoyed this. It's an EP first and foremost, but it was close to album length, so it wasn't like I think sometimes I'll find certain hip hop records where I get a little burnt out. They don't keep my
Yeah.
interest as much. And I can't think of any off the top of my head, but well, actually, I think I was listening to something by Freddie Gibbs the other week that I think I was probably like 70% of the way through, and I was like, all right, like I've had I've had my fill. Um, like I can get that way with like thrash metal and certain death metal too, where it's just like, all right,
Yeah.
I don't think I needed like 50 or 45 minutes of this.
Yeah.
Um, but if he had a longer style album, I think I'd be hooked all the way through. So
Yeah, I would say listen to Iceberg for sure. And then if you like that, I can give you like he like I said this is his like 11th project. You know, he has so much stuff out there.
yeah, it seems like I think I briefly looked at his Wikipedia page and there was just this long list of things he's involved with. So what has he been doing recently? Do you know?
So what I know about him is that he actually doesn't really make his money from this music. Because he's like he kind of made his name as like an instrument like a producer and like an instrumental
Hmm.
producer. So he sells a lot of music for like commercials and like to like sports leagues. Like he mentioned that like he sold a beat to like the Irish Rugby League for like a few million
Wow,
dollars like right before he
nice.
made this record. So I very much think that he's kind of like almost like you know how directors will be like one for me, one for them. I think that he's kind of like that. So 2017 he
Yeah.
puts out the Iceberg. He does a live record. Does like a live version he does a live album in like 2018.
Hmm.
And then I think COVID happens and he has two young kids and that might like derailed kind of that. So I assume he's just been kind of like doing stuff behind the scenes, you know.
Yeah, I like to hear that he's kind of like selling beats and stuff, because I think I've kind of had this. I get kind of annoyed when people criticize artists for making money on what they do and calling anything related to gaining a profit as selling out. I mean, especially a guy like this, he's not this mega star. I mean, he's got to eat. He's got bills to pay. And there's a difference between, hey, I made this beat and I'm selling it to ESPN to play during, I don't know, MLB playoffs or something.
Right.
Versus, hi, I'm Oddisee and I'm sponsoring like Pepsi. You know, like it.
Yeah.
There's a difference between I'm making
the
money
Travis
versus
Scott McDonald's collaboration or whatever.
Yeah, Travis Scott and Fortnite shit. You know. Like,
no. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think there's like, there's an interview with David Cross. I think like, God, around the time this EP came out, honestly, when he made his movie Hit, which I watched a lot in like 2016. I don't know if it's actually still good, but he made a point. He was like, when I was coming up, it was always don't sell out, and for kids today, it's like there's no other option. Like sell the fuck out because like there's no money anywhere else, and I think that that speaks to like streaming and like there's a larger discussion there we don't need to get into, but yeah, I agree. Like, he's not compromising his art to like make some money, selling instrumental records,
Yeah.
And if it lets him fund music like this, then like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
And he's still on an indie label, like, you know what I mean? Like he's kind of been like doing this on his own terms, I think.
Yeah. And the difference is where you are, I don't want to say investing because it's not investing money, but like investing your time in where the companies you're working for. There's a difference if you're making something socially conscious and then you go and make a beat for fucking Amazon or something versus the Irish Rugby League. I mean, come on, that's pretty awesome. I want to make music for the Irish Rugby League. Come on. So
if you play your cards right, speaking of Irish, it's actually a good transition to our next record.
They're coming up, but we're gonna let some Oddisee tracks play that I don't know which one I'm gonna select yet. But when people listen to this, I would have already made the decision. So what's it gonna be? We're gonna find out right now.
If I could make time, I wouldn't make nothing else. I feel like with time, anything will probably make itself. Evolution or incentive. I'm just trying to grow to the point that my interests start taking care of. By my interest, then I take into account that I'm preparing an account to take care of me. In the distance, know a lot of homies that ain't got no plans. Know a lot of ladies that ain't got no mans. They'll settle for each other like they got no chance. I ain't saying that you need to do, not no ma'am. Use ma'am, understand you, it's not no grand. Excuse me for being rude, no it sounds so crass, but political correctness in my program on PG. I was raised around a hollow class, yeah. Got me feeling like a dinosaur. I'm coming from a nerd, we'll be new each other business, but like diamonds in the ore, we just minded more. They say the real becoming harder to find. Good news, mean a lot of you probably dying. I'm moving out the city cause of all the property buying. Let alone cover rent for the crib each month, so you can move to LA where you can still cheap stunt. Hey, can I get a witness? Black entrepreneur here, can I get some business? Taking out a loan, not asking forgiveness. Just take away the stone hard place wasn't lifting, cause it landed on me. I ain't land on it. Grandma never cussed like dag on it. Frustrated free, I'm picking lots, cause time's still sitting in the box. I ain't got no plans.
Danny, do you like pizza?
Who doesn't?
Well, ex-Papa John CEO and pizza chain founder Papa John himself is weighing in on what gave the company's customers better pizza and better ingredients. According to him, it was the company's conservative values that made the pizza better. This is from I like how we're just highlighting the articles that we found. This is from the good old Huffington Post. It says here, shout out to our sponsors, Huffington Post. I also wanted to shout out our sponsor earlier, Eggland's Best. They're sponsoring us now. They don't know it yet, but they're sponsoring us. I
also want to shout out our shadow investor, our silent partner, George Soros.
Yeah. Yo, you still owe me for all those protests I went to. Come on, bro, pay up. But Papa John touched on the company's pizza once getting top rankings among the pizza chains before claiming its pies are now, quote, down with Little Caesars. Brah, brah. Shots fired. He says, we built the whole company on conservative values. Conservative ideology has two of the most critical attributes. Truth and God. If you run your life on principle, you're going to win. I really wish he said it has three most critical attributes.
Yeah,
Truth,
better ingredients.
truth, God, and pepperoni. I have been a big fan of watching his descent into madness over the years.
I mean, listen, you can just tell that man's a raging alcoholic. Like, it's so... I mean, like, we don't need to harp on the Papa too much, but, you know, all he had to do was not use the N-word in a public investor call.
And it's like he couldn't even do that. And I'm pretty sure they were like, okay, so here are all the words you can't say, and it's just one word on that list. It's like, just don't say this. Okay, Papa? You got it? Don't say it. And then he says it. It wasn't even... I thought he said it in, like, a training. Like, it was, like, prep for the actual call.
It was on, like, the quarterly investor call. So it was, like, the public call with, like, the shareholders. I was gonna... I saw something on Twitter I can't confirm or deny. So I'm gonna say it's true. But there's this old, like... One of the advertisements where people would, like... He would have people shout him, like, "Go, Papa!" And allegedly, the advertisers hated it. But he loved people shouting "Go Papa" at him so much that he, like, insisted it, like, be an ad campaign.
Oh my god.
I mean, I do think it's a little disrespectful to sell something called Papa's burger sauce when the Papa isn't back there, you know, seasoning it himself with his nut.
You gotta go back there and get the sauce yourself. You gotta make
That's what I'm saying. Like, there's only one Papa's burger sauce I'm invested in. I'm trying to have him sprayed on my
Papa
buns.
John's and I go, hey, is Papa back there? Can I get some of that sauce? And, you know, it's funny because everyone on Twitter, they were like, I'm done with Papa John's. I like Little Caesars. Hold on. Pump the brakes. I'm not going that far.
Listen, the Little Caesars owner was like a saint relative to the average chain pizza owner. Like, the Domino's guy is also insane.
I don't care if the Little Caesars saint rescued a busload of kittens from going into the river. His pizza sucks ass, and I ain't eating it.
Listen, all I'm gonna say is that the guy who founded Domino's tried to build a town based on conservative Catholic values in Florida, where he would, like, ban all condoms and, like, R-rated movies in it. And the ACLU had to be like, you can't just, like, ban shit into your town because you're Catholic. That garlic crust. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, crust's pretty good. I don't know. Little Caesars has nothing going for it. Their commercials suck. If Little Caesars tries to sponsor the cast, nah, get out of here. I do want to try and get Papa John on here, and I'm gonna call him Papa John the whole cast.
Big Papa.
So, I would like to ask Papa John what he thinks about a genre called shoegaze, which we return to. It's funny. I feel like we're returning back to things that we talked about in episode 1. So it's.
I was gonna say this is like this almost the same pairing of kind of genre and time frame as the first episode.
This is like Naruto Shippuden, but it's two white guys doing a podcast. We're a little bit older, but the story still isn't that great.
You know, I have no comment, Naruto fans.
They're coming for us. Like, you better watch out. But what'd you think? What'd you think of going back to the gaze?
Well, you know, I thought this record. Well, shall we introduce it first?
Yeah, maybe we should. I got to prepare myself. I know. I didn't even say what it was called. Jesus. So I gave Danny
too much Papa on the brain.
He's always on the brain. Let's be real. So I gave Danny "You Made Me Realize" by My Bloody Valentine. I knew I wanted to give you My Bloody Valentine at some point. Next to Slow Dive, they're the quintessential shoegaze band. So you kind of have these two pillars. And I said in the first episode, Slow Dive is more on this ethereal, softer sounding side of shoegaze, whereas My Bloody Valentine is known for the more harsher, noisier side. And everyone always talks about Loveless. I mean, that's probably the best shoegaze album of all time, arguably. But I didn't want to give you Loveless just as an album later on, just because I don't know. There's other cooler shoegaze record. Well, not maybe not cooler. I don't know. Tripping over my own words, but there's other shoegaze records out there that I think could be highlighted as well. But when we were doing an EP episode, I was like, oh, you made me realize would be perfect because I think this is an awesome and great introduction to them. It's like a little over 15 minutes. So it's either, hey, you're going to like this or not. If you don't like it, then, you're probably not going to enjoy their other stuff. But it came out in 1988. So it was, I think the same year their debut album came out. So it's like this prequel, but I almost think it's a little bit of a more complete sound of what you're getting with My Bloody Valentine, because their debut album, it's called Isn't Anything. It's pretty good, but again, this being like 17 minutes, it's digestible, and very good overall survey of their style. So with that introduction, what did you think?
I really liked it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I also for an Irish band, I thought it was also pretty good for like the summery vibe we're going through right now. The heat wave, I was really getting heated up. My Bloody Valentine. I think what was interesting to me is that you said so this comes out right before their debut album. So is this like one of their first projects?
So, and you had messaged me. You were curious to hear about their history. So the My Bloody Valentine history is pretty interesting because they did make stuff before this. They had all sorts of EPs and stuff that they're not on Spotify or anything, but you can easily find them on YouTube. Like their very first EP came out in like 85, and it's a lot more post-punk. Like a little bit more gothic. It's very 1985 alternative rock in the UK. So it didn't really stand out. They had I think the lead singer at the time, I want to say it was David Conway, and he ended up leaving the band because I think he wanted to just devote more time to being a writer. So then Kevin Shields, who was kind of like the other main dude in the band, he took over, and then from there that's where MBV like really started to come into their own. It's hard to say that like where the influence for shoegaze comes from, because for me they really put it on the map, and when you got to look at the influences, you got to look to the States, and two big names, Sonic Youth and Dinosaur Jr. If it wasn't for those two bands, you would not have had the style that My Bloody Valentine really developed. I mean, there were other shoegaze bands at the time, but a lot of them were more in that slow dive realm. In college, I went through this period where I was listening to like every shoegaze album that was like coming out. I was absorbing so much of it, and a lot of it all kind of starts to sound the same. But you could say that about anything if you absorb a lot of it. But what always stuck out to me about MBV was just it's more in your face, not in like this punk sense, but just it's the sound. There's just so much of it going on. There's so much sound without it going into that whole wall of sound, loudness war sort of ideology. And Kevin Shields is kind of a freak when it comes to production. I mean, there's a running joke in the Indian shoegaze world of, he's always saying, "Oh, the next My Bloody Valentine album, it's done, it's almost ready to go." And I mean, he's been saying this shit for like 10 years now. Because he's just tinkering with so much stuff in the production room. But again, what I like about this is I don't think he was quite there yet at his most like insane when it comes to production. But that's kind of the history. They in another world they would have just kind of been another sort of Joy Division-esque sound. One guy leaves, Kevin Shields is like, okay, gets Belinda Butcher to be in the band and do some vocals. And I think her vocals are super important. Like, she sings Drive It All Over Me, so the very airy, light vocals that shoegaze has really become known for. So that's kind of a brief overview of how they got to where they were.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you said the influences you have to look to the States. You know, I think I'm less familiar with Sonic Youth and Dinosaur Jr., but, you know, I've listened to a fair amount of like 80s alternative rock, particularly like college rock. You know, stuff like REM and Husker Du and that sort of like jangle pop sound, I think, is where I fall into more. And man, I heard a lot of that in this record. You know, I heard a lot of post-hardcore in this, you know, post-punk. You know, it feels like, I asked about the history because it feels like this is a band that has not fully found its sound yet. Like, there's elements. That's
why I love it.
Like Thorn was one of my favorite tracks, and that has, you know, it has such an early REM kind of jangle pop sound.
Oh yeah.
But then it has that very distorted, weird guitar line over the top of it.
Yeah, like
in the intro. Yeah, and like so it's like, oh, like you can see like, okay, they're playing with these palettes. They're playing with stuff that's like, you know, out there and, you know, acclaimed and great, but they're starting to tinker with it enough. And I think that's why the intro track to me, like the eponymous track, You Made Me Realize. I mean, I think that is the one where, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's the one where I'm like, this is the one that makes me most interested to want to hear what they do next.
Yeah, it's so, it just boom, it immediately starts off, and I think you would really enjoy Loveless if you like this, and I think you would really enjoy Loveless, because it's almost become a meme. But the beginning of Loveless, it just starts like burn, and just like all these guitars everywhere, sort of like this, how it's just boom, we're right into it. It's like you're outside of the pub getting sucker punched, and it's like, here you go, like this is your shitty night in Dublin or something.
And the bass line on it just goes.
I'm so glad you mentioned the bass. There are two things I want to touch on. But since you mentioned the bass, yes, shoegaze puts vocals in the back and guitar to the forefront, but the bass on this entire EP is fucking awesome. It really sticks out to me. I think the bass is great on pretty much every single track, but I think on Drive It All Over Me, it's really noticeable. Drive It All Over Me and Thorn, in another world, those could have been like Smith's songs. Yes. If you tinkered with stuff and made it less, like I could just hear Morrissey over like some of those tracks, you know? It took that jangle pop, Brit pop sound, like early Brit pop, and like you said, they're tinkering with it. They're figuring out their own sound, and I think that's really, really exciting to hear, because it's not every day that you get to hear a band like on an album really figuring their shit out and kind of start their own genre. You know, not to say, oh, well, My Bloody Valentine, they were the ones that started shoegaze. It was them. No one else did it. But they put it on the map, and they were the band that I would pretty much every shoegaze band to come after, people are still trying to sound like them, and no one else can sound like them except My Bloody Valentine. Now, a lot of that stuff is down to post-production, but it's fun to hear that experimentation. Like, listening to this, again, there were so many moments that it made me want to go down, pick up the guitar, and mess with my own pedal board and my own effects and stuff. And at the end of the day, I think that's what music's about. You know, encouraging others, motivating others to create shit, whether it's music or something, but just giving you a feeling. So you were saying all the things that I was hoping you would say, and I'm glad it was clicking.
Yeah, you know, I think that like 1988, 1989, 1990. I'm like I said, I'd say I'm less familiar with the UK alternative rock, but at least in American alternative rock, you know, that's kind of a watershed moment. Like, you know, because it all blows up in 91, right? Like Nirvana comes out in 91 and the floodgates are open. And, you know, But the sound of what was popular in like quote unquote alternative rock in 1988 versus 1991 are kind of worlds apart. You know, like, you know, REM goes from like a kind of like darker jangle pop alternative band to doing like essentially the origins of like adult contemporary music in 1990. You know, like grunge revolution, right? All this sort of stuff. It gets a lot heavier, and I think that, you know, this record coming out when it does, I've really enjoyed. It's almost like a time capsule. As far as sort of like it's this transitory period in the music, and the sound, and the fact that the band themselves are sort of sound transitory was very good. I was gonna say that, you know, I think that it's rare that you get a record where the band is figuring it themselves out and you can really clearly hear their influences, and it's still good. You know, I think that when your record is so easily, if the family tree of the record is so easily identified, it can almost become like, well, why aren't I just listening to Dinosaur Jr.? Why aren't I just listening to Sonic Youth? Or why aren't I just listening to the Smiths right now, right? Instead of this band trying to like, you know, I think that originality is held in high esteem, especially in music. Innovation is really important. So to hear like you're sort of like on the precipice of like breaking through the glass, you know, and I say nothing. The music, like, you know, I wanted to ask you a question. I actually have one question. Do you think that My Bloody Valentine knew how horny a song about being driven all over, getting walked all over would be in the year of our Lord 2022? Because it was really hard for me to like separate that from being like, oh, he wants her to get in his car and drive, or they want him to get in the car and drive all over him. Like, all right.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's funny. I love how like horny this album is, or this EP
it's
is.
So okay. I also wanted to ask, how old are these guys? Because I was like,
oh, they
sound like they're 17. Like, it's so emo
young
and so horny at the same time.
They
like
were
the first
young.
song's like, get the fuck out of me, go kill yourself, and then the end it's like, please, I'm just a small little bean, drive your car all over me, you know.
I mean, I think they were younger than us. I think Kevin Shields was probably 24 or 25.
That's so old.
Like, they're not teens, but I think in a way I always kind of viewed it as sort of tongue-in-cheek in this way. Like, these aren't records to, these aren't songs to make you hot or anything. I'm like, oh yeah, like that's got me in the mood. I think it's just, well, we need to put some lyrics to this. We can kind of make it like sexual. I mean, slow. I mean, just listen to the song. I mean, come on. That's about getting it. But yeah, there's and then on Isn't Anything, the title track is called Soft as Snow but Warm Inside. I mean, come on.
All right. All right.
Like, I do think it's kind of tongue in cheek. Now, Loveless still has a bit of that. It's more lustful than romantic. And I think, you know, if I had to make an argument as to why, I think it's this sort of raunchiness to everything. Like, the music kind of feels dirty, and it's this vibe of like, look, we can just have this one night stand and that's it. If you had to create, you know, we're talking about vibes with the previous selection, but that's kind of everything it goes for. But it's just like a bunch of college kids. I don't know. Again, I don't know how old everyone else in the band was, but I know Kevin Shields was around 24 or 25.
Yeah.
Little old to be writing horny songs. I don't know. But Rivers Cuomo's out here being like fucking 50 writing songs about girls on the boardwalk. So if Rivers Cuomo's still doing it,
well, Rivers
who
is
knows?
It's almost Rivers Cuomo is the living embodiment of like a meme.
If you're an Asian woman, look out for him.
Hey, he put out that list. He put out that list, and not all of his songs are about Asian women. Some of them are of other races.
I have some black friends. It's okay. It's that's pretty much the equivalent. But yeah, it's I mean, like you were saying, it's cool to hear the influences, but still hear a band have its own style. Whereas you'd said something where it was like, why don't I just go listen to Dinosaur Jr. or just go listen to Sonic Youth? There's so many shoegaze bands today that I come across where it's, there's some cool ideas. I like what you're doing, but I could just go listen to My Bloody Valentine because they were doing this better than you. That's why a lot of the shoegaze bands I love today are the ones that take those influences, but it's like, oh, you kind of sound like a country band almost. Like that's a really cool combination. Or oh, the vocals here are kind of like something out of pop punk. You don't really hear those two come together, as opposed to just, oh, we listened to Loveless a lot and wanted to sound like that. It's fun if you start off that way, but ultimately I think if you're a serious musician, you should be trying to find your sound, experiment with it, advance on it, and not just sticking to what works. Because then I don't know, as a musician, I would get bored. I would get bored doing the same thing and putting out the same kind of record every year.
You should tell that to Drake. That man has been phoning in for a hot minute. No,
I guess when you're making that much money, it's like whatever.
yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think part of, I think we're getting, maybe because we're talking about records that are under 30 minutes, but talking more about like over bigger ideas, but it's really hard to be innovative, especially when you're working within the confines of a genre that was really kind of a product of influences from, at this point, almost 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And the problem is, not a problem, but now everyone can put their music up, where there's always been a lot of people who are good musicians, but not everyone's necessarily an innovative songwriter.
Right.
And I think of that a lot with like, bringing back before by talking about like album fatigue. I think that, there's a lot of really good music I hear, like newer stuff, but sometimes I'm like, damn, like this is so, repetitive. This is so, someone aping someone better, or someone just doing like the same shit like 5 other people are doing, and like,
right.
I think that's why it's interesting to listen back to like, the sort of older indie, like, the old indie rock system where, you didn't have to have that one song break on Spotify, or like have that one album like break through a certain like influencer gatekeeper community, where it was like, okay, like people who are in the know this record label, and they'll get the catalog and they'll order this record, and like it gives you like, you're probably not eating much beyond the free chips at the pub or whatever, but like
yeah,
you're given a chance to experiment in like a studio setting, and in a way where like there's less pressure to like, like immediately blow up or maybe ever blow up. I don't know. I also think it's interesting when like people are making music, like I said, whose genre influences are, really at this point, like, going back to the 80s, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, I think it's a very like difficult proposition for anyone. I mean, just join your dad's like Leonard Skinner cover band,
In terms of were there any standout tracks for you?
I would say the intro, You May Realize, and then I really liked Drive All Over Me.
Yeah.
That to me was the least innovative song. It was one that reminded me most of the college rock I already liked. But I was like, oh, this is really nice. This is fun. It's got a good tempo. The guitar is very like jangly and pretty.
Right.
And then, they have that sort of noise, like bridge, you'd call it, and sort of, so it's still kind of like, we're still, doing our thing, and obviously, I love the subject matter, a lot.
Well, I was gonna say, when they play You Made Me Realize, when they play that live, they'll enter into this. It can be anywhere from like 15 minutes. I've heard that some have said it was like 40 minutes, but
Jesus
it's just
Christ.
a fuck ton of noise, and it's just, and it goes like ear piercing decibels. I didn't catch them live back in, it was like 2018 or something, maybe 2017. They went on tour. Did only in maybe like 5 cities or something, and I don't think
Mm.
I got tickets quick enough. But a friend of mine went, and I think they played that, and he was like, it was insane. So it's like this. I like the idea of keeping someone just trapped with your noise, and it's oppressive, and it's just it's really cool. It's like the music is its own live thing. So I would look up. I think people have started to call it the Holocaust section of like when they will
Christ.
just, in the middle of that track of You Made Me Realize, there's kind of like this instrumental break. Like that's when it
Yes.
happens.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I would look up some videos of that, just be like, oh my god, like that's insane. I don't know if I would enjoy hearing it live,
I would leave. Like you're scaring the hose.
but I think that's kind of. I think ultimately that was almost always sort of the goal of like
Right.
there's that whole discussion over accessibility in music, and again going back to a band like Sonic Youth where they're putting guitars and wild tunings and putting drumsticks underneath the strings and saying, hey, this is the sounds we're going to mess with, and we don't care about making money off this or making it accessible. That that age of youth where you want to explore all that stuff, it's just kind of that spirit that I find interesting. But you were going to say something earlier. Do you remember what you were going to touch upon?
I think I kind of already touched upon it, or you might have touched upon it. I was just gonna say I think that oh, it was. Oh, sorry. There goes
Uh-oh.
the fire alarm.
Podcast too hot.
Yeah. Sorry. Too spicy.
Whoo. That's a special one for the listeners.
No, I was just say fucking when you're dealing with like 5 songs, it's kind of hard, and you like the record, it's kind of hard to be like, well, fuck this song in particular, or like this song
Yeah.
is like, to me, all of the songs except for You Made Me Realize feel like in one lane, and then that song feels like this one feels different. Like it feels like the most like fully formed. Something I also want to say is, have you ever listened to like proto grunge bands like Mudhoney
Oh yeah.
before? The distortion effects, particularly on that song, but also on Slow, really remind me of the stuff Mudhoney was doing
Yeah.
around the same time.
Absolutely.
Like just really, fuzzy, like distorted, big, and I think that's also why I like it, because I really do like that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think you would enjoy more of My Bloody Valentine stuff. I mean, Loveless is a masterpiece for a reason. Um, a question I wanted to ask: you've listened to the two pillars of the gaze,
Yes.
Slowdive and My Bloody Valentine. Is there one that you prefer now?
It's hard to say. I think that this record felt, because I said it felt like it was still such like a college rock influence. It's hard for me to like
Mm-hmm.
think of them. If I had to compare, like, You Made Me Realize as a song versus like my favorite Slow Dive songs, I probably prefer this because it
Mm-hmm.
has more of that like post punk energy. But
Mm-hmm.
I can't comment as to whether or not this carries through the rest of their work. I do think that
Yeah.
Slow Dive, at least in these two projects, like the Slow Dive album is still the favorite, probably the favorite thing you've shown me. Like I think it is a much more conceptually interesting, a much more dynamic, and I think
Yeah. And
you know,
granted, we're comparing an EP to an album, but for me, I think My Bloody Valentine is the preferred band of the two,
mm,
but it is very much it depends on what I want when I'm listening to the music. Because there are some slow dive songs. Their last album came out, I think 2016 or maybe even 2017, and the opening track, Slow Mo, just the climax of that song is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. So
mm,
if I want this just weightless ethereal feeling, I'll go for that. But if I just want this sort of cavernous, reverby fuzz, I mean, MBV are doing that better than anybody. But that's pretty much it. I would definitely encourage you to do Loveless. I don't think I'll
Absolutely.
ever pick Loveless for this podcast. Just like what I was saying earlier, I feel like there are other albums that we can chat about, and I don't want to try and do the same artists.
Yeah,
I want
agreed.
to try and keep it to like one artist because the conversation is kind of probably going to be more about the same stuff. But yeah, glad to hear you enjoyed it. I was curious. I was curious to hear what you were to say about this one.
No, yeah, it was, like I said, a lot of fun. I've been every summer for the past couple years, like I feel like an REM phase, so I think this really kind of teed up in that.
They're a
This
good
is really
summer
good.
band. Cool. Well, that was You Made Me Realize by My Bloody Valentine, so enjoy some of that.
So we had planned a different intro bit. That was going to be impressions of Donald Trump talking about Jared Fogle. But
Oh my god.
But frankly, I'm not confident in my Donald Trump impression at all, and I don't want to lose one of the two listeners we already have. So I just wanted to take this time to reflect. We've talked a lot about human embodiments of fast food franchises so far this episode, and I thought we'd just cap it off talking about perhaps one of the most emblematic Americans we've ever had. Mr. Jared Fogle. Icon. Pedophile. Cold cut aficionado.
Oh my god. Isn't he out of prison soon?
No, he's in prison till I think it's like 2025.
That's like 3 years?
Yeah, no, Jared Fogle. Okay, the question is, does Jared Fogle run for public office because the woke mob canceled him?
God.
Does he get an official pardon from
God.
President for Life Trump in 2024?
My goal is I gotta go to a Trump rally, and there's gotta be like a Q&A, and I gotta ask, Trump, you seem to be a guy who appreciates sandwiches. You lived in the city, the Big Apple. They locked up a man named Jared Fogle. He's about to be on the streets. Are you giving him a pardon?
I mean,
I want to be the one to put that out there, and it's going to be a major national story. No one realizes it, but it's almost 2025, and Jared Fogle is almost out. So,
I was gonna say Jared Fogle is probably Trump's favorite Jared. I don't think he cares for Mr. Kushner very much. So, run it back. Have Jared Fogle try and solve the Israel-Palestine conflict this time around. It's got to be better than the last time.
Jared Fogle. Oh man, I just think that story, just everything about it is hilarious.
It's so weird.
The subway guy.
Like, if you had to explain, there's a lot of people who dunk on the U.S. for just being a land of like McDonald's and like suburbs, and it's hard to weird religious people, and it's hard to think of a story that really embodies all of that weird stuff about Americana better than the story of Jared Fogle.
Yeah.
Like, you have a man who's ostensibly a mascot, but he's just a guy. Like, there's nothing, like, who allegedly lost, like, hundreds of pounds eating fast food every day.
That was so profound. He allegedly a mascot, but he's just a guy.
And he was, like, everywhere. Like, there's that famous...
I know, you couldn't escape. And people were like, oh, I love that man. He's so...
And then he was plowing children. And then he was molesting children on the side,
I heard a rumor that the reason he actually lost all that weight was because he was essentially stalking this woman who lived above him and would kept going up and down the stairs.
No, stop.
I don't know how true that was. I really hope it's true though. I can just imagine like it's Jared again. Like you just can't get rid of him. But I can believe it.
You know who Jared reminds me of? Like, especially like looking back on it. Did you ever watch Malcolm in the Middle?
Yeah.
Lois's creepy coworker who's like in love with her.
Oh my god.
Like that. Like that's giving Jared Fogle energy. But
this is probably the longest conversation any podcast has had about Jared Fogle.
We'll just wait till we start our sister podcast, which is a history true crime podcast about the life and times of one Mr. Jared S. Fogle.
Jared Esquire Fogle.
I'm not sure if that's his middle initial, but we're going to run with it.
I gotta look it up now. Can we find his middle name?
I'm absolutely sure we can find a disturbing amount of information about a guy who ate a lot of fucking canned black olives on bread.
Danny. His middle name is Scott. So you were right.
J.S. Fogle.
Oh my god.
I don't want anyone to ever accuse me of being inaccurate ever fucking again, including you, Tyler. Even when I'm wrong. Even when I'm fucking wrong about the Eagles. I don't ever want to fucking hear it.
Jared Fogle got divorced on November 16th of 2015, and he agreed to pay his ex-wife $7 million. Damn,
yeah,
dude.
That seems like not that much given how many fucking commercials he was in.
He was on 2 episodes of Saturday Night Live. He was in Sharknado 3. Holy shit. I don't know if he was actually on this episode or if he was like featured in footage, but there was a Dr. Phil episode called Subway Sandwich King to Child Sex Scandal, Jared Fogle's Secret Audio Tapes.
I remember there's a famous image of him in like a Superman comic.
Oh yes! I know exactly what you're talking about. He's like shaking Superman's. Yeah. I got it right here.
He's shaking Superman's hand. Superman's saying, "Thanks for lending a helping hand," and Jared saying, "The same goes for all of you," as he looks at the Justice League.
Oh my god!
Oh my god! Not the Justice League Subway collab.
They had a few of these. Jesus Christ, Jared Fogle. Wow. Moving on. We are, unless they take us off the air for this Jared Fogle discussion.
For truth. They're trying to censor the truth about an American hero.
We got a second episode, or just kidding, we have a 6th episode coming at you in a month. What albums are we going to be talking about, Danny?
Well, Tyler, I was really belaboring what record to give you.
Uh-oh.
And, I think it's time. I gotta lay on you 1996's, I believe. It might be 95. Oh my fucking god.
It's the warning.
They don't want us to hear it.
Die for the cast. You'll die for this podcast.
No, our smoke detectors are insanely sensitive. It's like literally water will be boiling and they'll go off.
Oh my god.
It's fucking great. Our management has not fixed our fan. Anyway, I was going to give you a Dr. Octagon Ecologist by Dr. Octagon, which is a super group of Cool Keith, Dan the Automator, and DJ Q Burt.
Nice.
The less I say, the better. How's that? All I'm going to say, but I know you've expressed you like MF Doom in the past, and I think it'll be a fun listen, I'd say.
I can't wait. I looked it up, and I'm seeing a lot of words that I like. I'm like, those are cool words.
I mean, I'll just say it. It's a concept record about a gynecologist who lives on Jupiter in the year 3000.
Hell yes.
That's all I got.
That's exactly what I was hoping. I'm gonna give you an album that came out in 2012. It's called Ocean by a band called Dive. again, more in that dream pop, but it's one of my favorite albums of all time. Honestly, I love the guitar work on it, and I don't think it's an album you're ever gonna see on any sort of like best ever albums list, unless that list was written by me. Then it would be on there. But I've always wanted to talk about it and have more people listen to it. So, yeah, Dives Ocean. And what are we leaving these good people with? Any last words?
I know I was gonna say free Jared, but I can't bring myself to say that.
No, yeah, that'll get sampled and you're out of a job.
Context. Fuck.
Yeah.
No. Fuck you. You know. Thanks for listening, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see you around. That's it. I don't know what else to tell you. We're gonna play the theme song, and we're gonna see you next time. Whatever.